Episode 56 EIN November 3, 2024. District of Columbia and Colorado roll out heat pump rebates. In Episode 56 ZLC Zero RAWSEP View. 1 World 2 United States 3 Alaska 4 Arizona 5 California Humboldt County 6 Colorado 7 District of Columbia heat pump rebates. 8 Florida 9 Georgia 10 Illinois 11 Maine 12 Maryland 13 Massachusetts 14 B Michigan. The electric vehicle race to second place behind Tesla. Ford lags because it hasn't developed battery factories within the United States compared GM. 15 Nevada 16 New Hampshire 17 New Jersey 18 New York 19 Ohio 20 Ohio 21 Oregon 22 Pennsylvania 23 Texas 24 Vermont. Environmental groups raise concerns about wood biofuels and clean heat standard. Vermont Public. As public comments flow in about the Public Utility Commission's work on a clean heat standard, many have raised concerns about the role of burning wood and biofuels in the policy. Dozens of Vermonters. Additionally, it exposes people to wood smoke, which carries health risks. 25 Virginia 26 Washington 27 Wisconsin 28 Canada 29 Australia 30 United Kingdom. Free electricity anyone? How Britain is trying to green its grid. The problem. History's biggest polluters need to rapidly pivot away from the fossil fuels that have helped them prosper. 31 Europe 32 Germany 33 Bangladesh 34 India. Diwali unnecessary solid fuel fireworks pollute the air, adding PM2.5 to what already is emitted by indoor residential wood burning and field stubble burning. 35 Indonesia 36 Pakistan 37 South Korea 38 PM2.5 and human health. Main content. Zero RAWSEP View. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only for home building and furniture building. For just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses. This article in a wood burning industry magazine admits that wood burning is a substantial source of PM2.5 emissions. Yet this article, since it is in a magazine that is an arm of the wood burning industry, states that this wood burning should continue, presumably because it is called renewable. Wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously. And wood burning emits both CO2 and PM2.5, and PM2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. Wood burning emits 90% PM2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lung, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the EcoDesign wood stove. An international convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. A recent scientific paper showed that when wildfire smoke PM2.5 reaches intact trees, the trees close their pores against the PM2.5, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM2.5, and this holding their breath by trees inhibits photosynthesis. So the intact trees both do not absorb PM2.5 from the air, and the intact trees do not absorb a normal amount of CO2 because their photosynthesis function is inhibited in the presence of wood burning smoke PM2.5. 1 World. Geothermal Heat Pump Market to breach $12.5 billion by 2031. EIN Press Wire. Global geothermal heat pump market projected to grow at a CAGR of 7.6% from 2022 to 2031. 1A World. PM2.5 2024's most viewed World Pumps news stories. World Pumps. Our PM2.5 November issue of World Pumps magazine BASF's funding approval for the world's largest industrial heat pump and the new president of 1B World. Protecting nature with the U.S. on the sidelines. RAWSEP View. It is perhaps understandable that the upheaval of the United States presidential election with an unknown outcome may make the COP organizers cautious in giving access to a government that will be in transition at the time of the convention. Either transition to the current vice president or transition in RAWSEP's view to an unhinged would-be dictator. But is this non-party status to the United States at the convention indicative of another kind of problem between the United States and the world represented by COP? COP accepts at this time the convention of the debunked scientific theory of carbon neutrality of wood burning, which is used as an excuse to not count wood burning emissions when calculating if each nation is meeting its climate goals. So being an accepted member of that club for the reason of not accepting the excuse carbon neutrality of wood burning would be a badge of honor, but apparently the United States is a non-party because the United States has not signed the COP treaty. From recent United States non-activity against wood burning emissions, it is apparent that the United States at this time accepts the excuse of carbon neutrality of wood burning imposed on the UN by non-scientific lobbying by wood burning industry. RAWSEP View. Neither the UN or COP or the United States has clean hands in this issue of acceptance of the debunked excuse and theory of carbon neutrality of wood burning. Will the United Nations, UN, COP24, or the United States face reality at some point, maybe at the COP24 conference, and begin to count polluting wood burning emissions just as they count the polluting fossil fuel emissions, in order to make decisions on how to tackle climate change with all their logical faculties and all the current data at their disposal? Key excerpt from the article, which connects loss of diversity as an indicator of threat to the well-being of humans also. RAWSEP is an advocate for the near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners whose wood smoke enters the yards of near neighbors and sickens them. In this way, human near neighbors are like canaries in a coal mine, living indicators of threats to human health and threats to the climate, like a canary dropping from its perch, the first indication that conditions do not support life. The excerpt from the article. Change a decline in global biodiversity that's unprecedented in human history, threatening not only countless species but the well-being of humans too. The United States Council on Environmental Quality's Brenda Mallory links both of the following articles. Second key excerpt from this article. On a panel on Tuesday, Brenda Mallory, chair of the Biden administration's Council on Environmental Quality, spoke of how the U.S. was on track to safeguard at least 30% of its land and waters by 2030. From the article headline. At the global biodiversity talks underway in Cali, Colombia, government officials from a single nation wear badges with a red streak along the bottom emblazoned with a small but jarring word. Non-party. Call it a diplomatic scarlet letter. That country is the United States. The only other delegation with the same status is the Holy See. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. All the other country delegates saunter around the conference with badges that sport an inviting green line with the word party granting them access to rooms where the most sensitive negotiations take place. When I started covering biodiversity a few years ago, I was surprised to learn that the U.S. wasn't a member of the treaty that underpins global agreements on the issue. The absence seemed especially significant given the scale of the problem. A decline in global biodiversity that's unprecedented in human history, threatening not only countless species but the well-being of humans too. I quickly came to understand that the U.S. government does indeed participate in UN biodiversity talks, and in significant ways. It sends a delegation. It gives hundreds of millions of dollars in biodiversity funding to other countries. And of course it takes its own actions to conserve nature. But when decisions are being made at the global talks, the United States is relegated to the diplomatic sidelines along with other observers like advocacy and business groups. But the U.S. is here. It started differently. In the 1980s, the U.S. played a significant role in drafting and negotiating the Biodiversity Treaty. The first President George Bush declined to sign it, but President Bill Clinton did in 1993. The next step was ratification, which requires 2/3 approval by the Senate. Republicans led by Jesse Helms and Bob Dole opposed it. U.S. ratification has been a long shot ever since. A crowded conference room with dozens of people seated at rows of desks and several people sitting at tables on stage in the back of the room. A general view of the opening ceremony of the summit on October 21st. As a non-party, the U.S. is at a disadvantage in negotiations. Nevertheless, U.S. civil society has long had a big presence at biodiversity talks. This year its president Drove Showmaker said. And a government delegation about 36 strong flew in from Washington and the embassy in Bogota. On a panel on Tuesday, Brenda Mallory, chair of the Biden administration's Council on Environmental Quality, spoke of how the U.S. was on track to safeguard at least 30% of its land and waters by 2030. The effort began under the Biden administration in 2021, and it mirrors a global commitment known as 30 by 30 reached under the Biodiversity Treaty the following year. The biodiversity and climate crises know no borders, and we really have to fight this together, she concluded to applause. But in Cali, where talks opened on October 21st, the United States is at a big disadvantage in that fight. For example, the haggling over language in United Nations negotiations is epic. For the U.S. to suggest a word change, it must ask allies to put forward the proposal. And as countries duke it out in the final days over the thorniest issues, the United States will be relegated farther and farther to the margins. Cell phones help. It really does require another level of diplomacy, said Christine Dawson, director of the Office of Conservation and Water in the U.S. State Department. When I've spoken about the United States' status with delegates and observers from around the world, some point to the fact that the U.S. still participates, but others look down or smirk or shake their heads. They express disappointment or exasperation. On Wednesday, one delegate for the European Union, a leftist member of parliament, was willing to give her opinion on the record. I personally think it's a scandal, she said, to a United States Council on Environmental Quality email newsletter. CEQ Environmental Justice Connector. Special Edition. Celebrating the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council. PM2.5 2024. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Federal Chief Environmental Justice Officer's Corner. I hope this special edition of the EJ Connector finds you well. This month, the Environmental Protection Agency (EPA) and the White House Council on Environmental Quality (CEQ) joined the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council (WEJAC) in Huntsville, Alabama, for its final public meeting of 2024. On the heels of this meeting, I wanted to take time to reflect on President Biden and Vice President Harris's legacy of elevating the voices of communities like never before. During his first week in office, President Biden established the WEJAC, the first ever presidential advisory body on environmental justice. The WEJAC is tasked with providing independent advice and recommendations on how to address current and historic environmental injustices to the White House Environmental Justice Interagency Council (IAC) and the chair of the CEQ, Brenda Mallory. Over the past 4 years, the WEJAC has provided recommendations on various White House environmental justice initiatives, including the Justice 40 Initiative, the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool, the Environmental Justice Scorecard, and Executive Order 14096 on revitalizing our nation's commitment to environmental justice for all. The WEJAC has been a partner in our efforts to ensure the federal government embeds the values of environmental justice in operations, policies, and practices. The Biden-Harris administration values listening to the concerns, recommendations, and aspirations of the WEJAC and members of the public to advance environmental justice. This past May, President Biden appointed 12 new members to the WEJAC. To each WEJAC member, I look forward to building on the strong foundation of the Biden-Harris administration's environmental justice agenda. We have created strong partnerships, listened to hundreds of public commenters, and navigated through the pandemic and other challenges. Through it all, your passion, your commitment, your time, and your talents do not go unnoticed. Most importantly, these collaborations with and recommendations from community leaders are making a difference, helping to implement and shape federal action to advance environmental justice for all. Overview of PM2.5 WEJAC meeting. On Wednesday, PM2.59, the WEJAC held its final public meeting of 2024. Members of the WEJAC federal agency staff from the IAC and members of the public received updates from CEQ, tuned into 2 panel discussions, and heard from over 50 public commenters. Public commenters shared their ideas, concerns, and lived experiences on a number of environmental justice issues. The public meeting highlighted historic progress made by the Biden-Harris administration to advance environmental justice, while recognizing that there is still much work to be done to ensure all people have the right to breathe clean air, drink clean water, and live in a healthy community. CEQ issued new charges. During the WEJAC public meeting, CEQ presented 2 new charges to the WEJAC. These charges emphasize 2 areas in which the guidance and recommendations of the WEJAC can help to inform the direction and impact of the federal government's efforts to address environmental injustices. NSDC Environmental Justice Science Data and Research Plan. In July 2024, the National Science and Technology Council's NSDC Environmental Justice Subcommittee released the first Environmental Justice Science Data and Research Plan to be updated biennially. CEQ has requested recommendations from the WEJAC to inform future versions of the NSDC Research Plan. Place-based and community-focused initiatives. CEQ has requested recommendations from the WEJAC to inform models for place-based and community-focused initiatives to address cumulative impacts from environmental injustices that could inform federal multi-agency collaboration. WEJAC-led panels. WEJAC member Angelo Logan of East Yard Communities for Environmental Justice facilitated a panel discussion titled Ports Freight and Goods Movement, Shipping from Bad to Moving to Good. Ports freight and other hubs for moving goods and resources can be a source of cumulative environmental injustices, emitting large amounts of greenhouse gases and harming neighboring communities. During the session, panelists shared the experiences and concerns of fence-aligned communities facing pollution, congestion, and other health hazards as a consequence of goods movement. Through sharing their research and perspectives, the panelists underscored the importance of decarbonizing goods movement infrastructure and centering people to ensure the sustainability, resilience, and health of communities. In recognition of this need, on PM2.5 President Biden announced a $3 billion investment to improve and electrify port infrastructure, supporting an estimated 40,000 good-paying and union jobs, combating the climate crisis, and reducing pollution for workers and surrounding communities. The Clean Ports program will improve air quality at ports across the country, advance the Justice 40 initiative, and align with the Biden-Harris administration's goal for a zero-emission freight sector. Building on ongoing collaboration. Established by President Biden through Executive Order 14008 on tackling the climate crisis at home and abroad, the WEJAC and federal agencies represented on the IAC together create an important infrastructure to incorporate the recommendations and advice of external environmental justice leaders into federal policy. Over the past 4 years, the WEJAC and federal agencies have come together numerous times to collaborate, learn from each other, listen, and share updates on progress to collectively advance the president's whole-of-government approach to environmental justice. Public meetings. Starting from the first WEJAC public meeting in March 2021, IAC agency staff have participated in WEJAC public meetings. For example, the December 2022 hybrid public meeting in Alexandria, Virginia, featured presentations and discussion on the EPA's Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, the National Climate Assessment, and federal cleanup efforts to address legacy pollution. During the June 2023 hybrid public meeting in Phoenix, Arizona, the WEJAC and the IAC discussed innovative technical assistance and capacity building and the Biden-Harris administration's environmental justice priorities like the Justice 40 initiative. The December 2023 virtual public meeting brought together agency participants in the IAC with a focus on ensuring that federal agency partners heard directly from the WEJAC on its recommendations on the Environmental Justice Scorecard and the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool. In June 2024, the IAC and WEJAC held a historic first joint public meeting under Executive Order 14096. This meeting was a forum through which federal agency partners and environmental justice leaders together shared progress, presented recommendations, and engaged in dialogue on the work there is still left to do. Work groups. In order to provide recommendations to CEQ and the IAC, the WEJAC forms work groups to coordinate, collaborate, and draft recommendations. IAC agency staff have engaged with WEJAC work groups to provide updates on agency work and answer subject matter questions to help inform WEJAC recommendations. Formal recommendations. Upon receiving formal recommendations from the WEJAC, CEQ and the IAC work closely to consider the recommendations in agency discussions and develop a formal response. The WEJAC's formal recommendations, as well as the administration's responses to the recommendations, can be found here. WEJAC EPA recommendations. White House Summit on Environmental Justice in Action. In July 2024, CEQ brought together over 100 people in person and thousands more virtually to participate in the first White House Summit on Environmental Justice in Action. For more on how the Biden-Harris administration's environmental justice agenda is delivering for communities, visit environmentaljustice.gov. 2B United States. RAWSEP View. Indoor natural gas emissions are higher from natural gas stoves than from natural gas furnaces. Both gas stoves and gas furnaces emit pollutants like carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxides, NOx, and methane, but gas stoves tend to have a higher concentration of these emissions within a smaller space due to lack of proper ventilation, while gas furnaces typically vent emissions outdoors, making the indoor exposure potentially lower. However, both can still contribute to indoor air pollution if not properly maintained and ventilated. 2C United States. New York Times. A pivotal choice: Trump versus Harris on climate change. Kamala Harris calls global warming an existential threat. Donald Trump dismisses it as a scam. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates of 501c3 nonprofit organization. October 28, 2024. If he returns to the White House, former President Donald J. Trump, who last month called climate change one of the greatest scams of all time, plans to build on his first-term attacks on the environment when he pulled the United States out of the Paris Climate Agreement and rolled back more than 100 environmental regulations. In a second term, he has promised to end federal support for a clean energy transition and hamstring wind and solar development while expanding oil and gas production. He has said he would again withdraw the country from the Paris Accord and potentially go further, blocking the United States from negotiating future global climate agreements. Kamala Harris is widely expected to continue federal support for wind, solar, and other forms of clean energy, along with electric vehicles in an effort to bring clean energy manufacturing onto American shores while shifting the economy away from fossil fuels. In 2022, she cast the tie-breaking vote on the biggest climate law in U.S. history, the Inflation Reduction Act, and has pledged to fully implement it. Although congressional Republicans may block new laws, and the conservative supermajority on the Supreme Court has hemmed in the authority of the Environmental Protection Agency, President Harris would be likely to try to use regulatory power to cut the emissions that are driving climate change. She is also expected to try to reduce the air and water pollution that is prevalent in marginalized communities. Mr. Trump, on the other hand, plans a full-scale repeal of what he calls the Biden administration's kamikaze climate regulations. His immediate agenda includes rescinding limits on greenhouse gas emissions from power plants and automobiles. After beating Mr. Trump in 2020, President Biden quickly rejoined the Paris Agreement, a voluntary pact among nearly 200 nations to curb climate change. At global climate talks last year, those nations agreed to transition away from fossil fuels. Mr. Trump considers the Paris Accord a ripoff, and recently told an NBC News reporter, "We'll take them out so fast your head will spin." There is also an effort brewing to convince Mr. Trump to withdraw from the underlying treaty, the United Framework Convention on Climate Change. The move could be challenged. The Constitution gives the Senate the power to enter into treaties, but it is silent on the question of termination. If successful, such a move could prevent the United States from participating in future global negotiations on climate change. Allies of Mr. Trump have promised that this time around the former president would be better positioned to dismantle environmental and climate rules aided by conservative judges he appointed and loyalists he intends to install throughout the government. Mr. Trump does not consider climate change a problem or even a scientific reality. As Hurricanes Helene and Milton battered the southeast, Mr. Trump ridiculed projections about climate-fueled sea level rise and assured people that if anything, they will enjoy more beachfront property. We have one candidate who has been a climate champion sued Big Oil and cast the deciding vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, running against somebody who calls climate change a hoax, makes fun of wind and solar, and denies the role that climate change plays in worsening extreme storms. Ms. Harris has moderated her position since she served as a U.S. Senator from California and ran for president in 2019. At the time, she co-sponsored a non-binding resolution calling for a Green New Deal, which called for converting the electric grid to 100% clean energy this decade, declared clean air, clean water, and healthy food to be basic human rights, and endorsed free healthcare and affordable housing for all Americans. The resolution did not pass. 2D United States. CCC highlights heat pump importance to stricter emissions cuts calls. HNV News. The Climate Change Committee CCC is backing further budgetary support for technologies such as heat pumps to meet calls for stricter carbon. 2E United States. This small startup's new tech is slashing home heat, hot water, and AC cost. Yahoo! Heat pump. The credit is 30% of the fully installed cost, whereas for heat pumps, it's typically capped at $2,000. 2F United States articles from the Cool Down website. Headline excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. 5 NASA technologies that could transform our future. The Cool Down. Sugar Volt aircraft. Unlocking electric power potential for air travel is a huge step in the effort to achieve this NASA and Boeing creation. Government agency issues permit for incredible feature on first-of-its-kind railway. The Cool Down. Swiss startup Sunways has developed a way to install removable solar panels between the rails of train tracks. United States. The government is offering homeowners $840 for money-saving clothes dryers. It's the future. The Cool Down. When you're tight on time, air drying your damp clothes just won't do. But the U.S. government is helping with heat pump clothes dryer rebates. United States. The government is offering a $7,200 tax credit for this money-saving home upgrade. The Cool Down. One of the best ways to save on your energy bills is by installing a geothermal heat pump, and the U.S. government will give you 30% off. United States. The government is offering homeowners $840 for money-saving clothes dryers. It's the future. The Cool Down. When you're tight on time, air drying your damp clothes just won't do. But the U.S. government is helping with heat pump clothes dryer rebates. Report reveals the hottest HVAC tech is generating enormous savings. The Cool Down. In the winter, they pull in heat from outside to warm up your home, and they push heat out to keep things cool in the summer. So heat pumps just move. Report reveals the hottest HVAC tech is generating enormous savings. The Cool Down. The Inflation Reduction Act allows homeowners to take advantage of federal incentives like tax credits and rebates to make heat pumps more. Researchers unveil groundbreaking fuel technology with far-reaching benefits for industry. The Cool Down. Now the waste created when producing clean energy sources can be used as a clean. Researchers at Baylor University. 2G United States. Clean energy is booming in the U.S., but the election could change that. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Over the past 2 years, a surge in clean energy manufacturing has helped push U.S. factory construction to the highest level in half a century. Solar power installations and electric car sales are breaking records. Even Republican-led states like Montana and Utah are writing climate plans to secure federal cash. Yet the law driving this dizzying transformation of America's energy landscape, the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act, is facing a highly uncertain future as next week's election looms. Donald Trump has suggested that if he returns to the White House, he would gut the law, which is expected to pour as much as $1.2 trillion over the next decade into technologies to fight climate change, including wind turbines, solar panels, nuclear reactors, carbon capture, and EVs, as well as the factories to supply them. 2H United States. PM2.5 and limited coverage. Multi-resolution analysis of HRRR meteorological parameters and GOES are AOD for hourly. ACS Publications. American Chemical Society. In recent years, satellite remote sensing data have been increasingly utilized in PM2.5 models to overcome the limited spatial coverage of ground. 2I United States. A self-regenerative heat pump based on a dual-functional relaxer ferroelectric polymer. Science. Electrocaloric EC cooling presents a promising approach to efficient and compact solid-state heat pumps. However, reported EC coolers have 2J United States. Heat pumps reduce energy use by 40% according to a new study. Warp News. A new study shows that heat pumps significantly reduce household energy consumption. Household carbon dioxide emissions decreased by 36%. 2K United States. The government is offering homeowners $840 for money-saving clothes dryers. It's the future MSN. The United States government is offering rebates of up to $840 for an increasingly popular electric device called a heat pump clothes dryer, in order to remove moisture from clothes heat pump clothes. 2L United States. You know what is scary? Not knowing what's in the air you're breathing. American Lung Association. Data shows that PM2.5 can lead to premature death in individuals with heart or lung disease, non-fatal heart attacks, irregular heartbeat. Aggravated. 2M United States. After residential success, DOE will test heat pumps for cold climates in commercial sector. Building design plus construction. All 8 manufacturers in the U.S. Department of Energy's Residential Cold Climate Heat Pump Challenge completed rigorous product field testing. 2N United States. DOE announces new tools making it easier for home contractors to install energy-saving. Department of Energy. Heat pump water heater and cold climate heat pump tools to guide contractors and homeowners through the decision-making process for selecting. 2O United States. Sharing essential knowledge and insights on heat pumps. ACR Journal. The knowledge manager at the Energy Saving Trust shares some interesting facts about what to consider before installing a heat pump in. 2P United States. EPA Air Monitoring Network misses 2.8 million Americans in pollution hotspots. EOS.org. EPA makes regulatory decisions regarding PM2.5 pollution based on monitoring from its state and local air monitoring station SLAMS network. 2Q United States. Daikin unveils new high-temperature commercial heat pump. HVP Magazine. Daikin has introduced the CZHT high-temperature commercial heat pump, a high-temperature air-to-water inverter heat pump, which it says provides. 2 are United States. Why you might want a combo washer-dryer. Forbes. Petrino cites an added benefit of heat pump technology. It's extremely gentle on fabrics, energy efficient, and does not release heat into the 3 Alaska. Petersburg Volunteer Fire Department responds to chimney fire on South Nordic Drive. KFSK. We recommend that when people have a wood-burning appliance, they check it every year at the Volunteer Fire Department. Smoke and carbon monoxide. Burn it pretty heavily. We recommend that when people have a wood-burning appliance, they check it every year at the Volunteer Fire Department. 4A Arizona. Arizona opens first phase of IRA rebate program. ACHR News. Initially, Arizona's Efficiency Arizona program in partnership with community action agencies will focus on providing heat pumps through IN. 4B Arizona. How a tiny panel up for election could steer Arizona away from clean power. The vote in a sunny state with huge solar potential reflects a growing nationwide fight over America's energy transition. 4 years, a Republican-led utility regulator encouraged clean energy sources like solar based on the lower costs to consumers. Recently, it's been reversing that. RAWSEP key excerpt from this article. There is an election on November 5, 2024 for 3 of the 5 seats which are up for grabs on the Arizona Corporation Commission, which regulates electric utilities. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. October 31, 2024. As Arizona voters go the polls, they have more control over their state's power plants and climate policies than they might realize. This year, 3 of the 5 seats are up for grabs on the Arizona Corporation Commission, which regulates electric utilities. The commission has authority over how electricity is generated, among other things, and what customers pay. In recent years, it has taken steps toward rolling back a clean energy mandate passed by a previous Republican-led board. It has also made it harder to build community solar in a state renowned for its sooniness, its critics say, and easier to build new fossil fuel-burning power plants. These boards exist in states nationwide, and while most are appointed, similarly contentious races playing out in states like Louisiana and Montana, where they're debating the future of coal power, which is particularly dirty, and what role natural gas and other fossil fuel should have. It's a fourth branch of government that nobody knows about, who's in your pocket every day, said Robert Burns, a Republican who served on Arizona's commission for 8 years. RAWSEP View. Pro-clean energy. Starting 2 decades ago, the Republican-controlled commission had encouraged a transition to renewable energy based on simple economics. Renewables were getting cheaper than fossil fuels. It initially required utilities it regulates to become 15% renewable by 2025, and later, during Mr. Burns' tenure, he sought to eliminate greenhouse gas emissions from power plants by 2050. That could have made Arizona even more of a clean energy leader. Today, it ranks as the 5th largest solar generator in the United States. RAWSEP View. Against clean energy. However, the pollution from wood burning replacing coal burning in some power plants is not addressed in this article. From the article. But utilities have struggled to transition away from fossil fuels. In 2014, the state's largest utility, Arizona Public Services, and its parent company, Pinnacle West Capital Corporation, paid more than $10 million to help elect 2 former commissioners. In the years since, the commission has become friendlier to fossil fuels, according to critics who include former Republican members. One current member was a registered lobbyist for a natural gas company. Robert Burns, former chairman of the commission, pursued clean energy policies. The commission has begun working to weaken state policies on renewable energy, its critics say. It's almost a dereliction of duty for any public utility commissioner to not be implementing and requiring renewable energy usage, said Arizona's Attorney General, a former Republican on the commission who switched parties in 2019 and is now a Democrat. RAWSEP View. The economic common sense of cost-effective clean energy. From the article. They don't seem to understand economics. The changes in the makeup of Arizona's utility board are an example of the long-running trend of interest groups turning their attention to regional or local elections, whether state house seats or local school boards, in pursuit of political goals. In a statement, a spokeswoman for the commission said the commission is very happy to report that the citizens of Arizona are receiving some of the most reliable and cost-effective energy in the country. She said the commission doesn't favor fossil fuels and recognizes the need for continued use of natural gas resources in order to maintain reliability as the transition to renewable energy, battery storage, and potentially new technology occurs. While Arizona suffers from extreme heat and a dwindling water supply partly worsened by climate change, the state has tapped into federal climate climate legislation to help fund changes to its grid that would make it cleaner. Arizona has received more than $11 billion in federal tax incentives and investments for electric vehicle charging stations and battery production. There is potentially up to $24 billion more in federal funding, much of it in solar energy, according to Jacob Corvidi of the Rocky Mountain Institute, an energy think tank. Arizona is a top 10 state in terms of pulling in Inflation Reduction Act dollars, he said, and it's punching above its weight, but it's not guaranteed to continue. Arizona's Attorney General served as a Republican on the Utility Commission from 2003 through 2010. She said that members didn't really talk about climate change, but that they wanted utilities to diversify their energy sources, reduce pollution, and lower costs for ratepayers. She helped pass Arizona's renewable energy standard in 2008. RAWSEP View. Repealing the clean energy positions of Arizona utilities does not make sense economically. The current commission has begun evaluating whether to repeal that standard. Renewables currently make up about 16% of generated electricity in Arizona, more than half of that solar. The current commission has also limited incentives on community solar, according to critics of the Arizona Solar Energy Industries Association, a trade group. It used to be that you could be a Republican and still value solar for resiliency or energy independence, or because you favored competition, she said. Arizona has faced worsening heat amid climate change. The commission is currently supporting one of the state's largest fossil fuel projects, new natural gas units, for Arizona Public Services. Joshua Polachek, a retired Foreign Service officer running for election to the commission as a Democrat, said decisions like approving these new units were locking in the market for decades to come. Both Mr. Thompson and Mr. Myers will remain on the commission until they're up for re-election in 2026. RAWSEP View. Who is running in the 2024 election? One Republican is seeking re-election while two other commissioners, the sole Democrat and another Republican, aren't seeing re-election. The top Republican candidate is a school board member who sued the state's largest school district over its support of transgender students. She, like her fellow Republican candidate, have questioned the science of climate change. During an interview at a 2023 festival for Turning Point, a conservative nonprofit, she called climate change a ruse meant to prop up China. The former chairman said that he votes Republican and doesn't believe in the science of climate change, but that he would have a hard time voting for his fellow party members on the commission, calling their choices misaligned with the free market. The decisions that they've made, the actions they've taken, I really don't believe is supportive of the ratepayer, he said. Meanwhile, Arizona, the state with the highest number of heat-related deaths in the country, is getting hotter. Phoenix had 113 consecutive days this year where the temperature hit or surpassed 100 degrees Fahrenheit. It's like a frog boiling in water situation, said Arizona's state director for Climate Cabinet, a nonprofit focused on local elections. You don't realize how much worse it's getting until it's too late. 5A California. Check Before You Burn pollution prevention program begins November 1st. Street Insider. Burning wood contributes to poor indoor air quality and poor air quality in surrounding neighborhoods. 8 no-burn days were called last winter. PR Newswire. Burning wood in their fireplaces. Under the Check Before You Burn program, residents are educated about the hazards of wood smoke and prohibited from burning firewood in a fireplace. 5B California Bakersfield. Call it Choose Not to Burn. Annual residential wood smoke reduction program kicks off Friday. The Bakersfield, California. There's something elemental about building a fire in the home hearth, but the Valley Air District is adamant that the health risks from wood smoke. 5C California Escalon. Wood smoke reduction program starts November 1st. Escalon Times. Residential wood burning is one of the valley's largest sources of wintertime PM2.5 emissions and directly affects neighborhood air quality. The San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District is urging all valley residents to help reduce harmful PM2.5 particulate matter 2.5 microns. 5D California Fresno. Residential wood smoke reduction program returns in November. ABC 30 Fresno. Keep an eye on your thermostat, close windows and doors, bundle up, and avoid burning would avoid creating pollution to heat your home. Depending on the air quality and pollution, any day can be declared as no burn for all no burning unless registered or burning discouraged. That particulate matter can come from your fireplace and cause health issues for others. You've got an elderly neighbor who has complained for 5E California Humboldt County. The EcoNews report. Proposed wood pellet biofuel project draws criticism. Lost Coast Outpost. Wood pellet biomass. Wood pellet biomass burning as a smokestack is even more carbon intensive than the fossil fuels it was meant to replace. California Humboldt County. Today in Soups Board and public voice concerns about wood pellet biofuel project. Lost Coast Outpost. She also addressed the impacts of wildfire smoke, saying, I appreciate any project that's going to be able to help make an impact at that scale. And in response, RCRC staff said the organization supports prescribed fire, but doesn't consider it an either-or choice with the wood pellet project. 5th. RAWSEP View. Residents against wood smoke emission particulates are concerned first with the air pollution from wood burning and the adverse health effects of PM2.5 from indoor residential wood burning on near neighbors, in whose yards the PM2.5 enters and sickens the near neighbors. This can be extrapolated to concern with the health effects of PM2.5 wood burning emissions from wood burning power plants on neighbors near to a wood burning power plant. Wood burning emissions of PM2.5 and CO2 also hasten climate change. Just don't burn wood to begin with. There are clean alternatives to wood burning in power plants in 2024, such as air, wind, and solar energy, which are also cheaper than wood burning in 2024. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. This proposal has drawn concern from environmental groups worried about the greenhouse gas emissions, air pollution, and impacts to forest health from the project. Excerpts from a transcript of a conversation. TW. Should we turn California trees into wood pellets to be burned in foreign power plants? That's the proposal being brought forward by Golden State Natural Resources, GSNR, a nonprofit organization formed by rural county representatives of California and Golden State Finance Authority. GSNR has just released their draft environmental impact report for the project, which proposed 2 wood pellet factories, one in Lassen County and another in Tuolumne, that will draw biomass from roughly a 100-mile radius around the plant. Those factories will turn woody biomass into pellets, which will be shipped by rail to Stockton, where the pellets will be loaded onto ocean-going ships to be delivered, likely to foreign power plants where they will be burned for energy. What's Humboldt's connection? Humboldt County's own supervisor RB sits on the board of directors for GSNR, and biomass from Humboldt may end up be turned into wood pellets. This proposal has drawn concern from environmental groups worried about the greenhouse gas emissions, air pollution, and impacts to forest health from the project. NJ of the Mount Shasta Bioregional Ecology Center and RVF of the Natural Resources Defense Council joined the show to discuss their concerns with the project. TW is the executive director of EPIC, the Environmental Protection Information Center, based in Arcata, California. TW spoke to RVF, the forest advocate at the Natural Resources Defense Council, and NK, the forest and watershed watch manager at the Mount Shasta, California, Bioregional Ecology Center about the controversial proposed project brought forward by Golden State Natural Resources in California to build 2 biomass pellet plants, one in Lassen and one in Tuolumne, and an export facility to send those pellets to China or Japan or other foreign markets to be burnt for energy. The draft environmental impact report has just been released. We are all reading through the document right now. TW. Hello, RVF. You have spent a lot of time in the Southeast. Pellet plants are part of the Southeast at this point. They've been around for a while. They supply wood pellets to European biomass plants. And so a lot of our experience of what is being proposed here has already been experienced elsewhere in other communities in the United States. Can you talk about how you got into this work and why you're passionate about tackling this Golden State Natural Resources, or as we'll call it, GSNR project? RVF. I'm a Southerner. I was born and raised in the South, and I started my career in the southeastern United States around 2014. I worked for a small organization in the southeastern United States, working to protect communities and work with communities that were facing impacts of industrial logging. When I started work in 2014, the biggest newcomer we saw on the stage was the wood pellet biomass industry, which had arisen only a few years earlier. It had really started operating around 2012 in the southeastern United States in response to renewable energy policies in Europe that claimed that forest biomass burning was carbon neutral. As such, coal plants couldn't wait to get their hands on wood because they were getting the greenhouse gas emission reductions claims, RAWSEP interjection, and reduction counts because wood smoke emissions were ignored and uncounted, that they so wanted, and thereby they were subsidized to the tune of today, up to billions of dollars. Because of those renewable energy policies, the wood pellet biomass industry just exploded in the southeastern United States. It is ground zero for wood pellet production. Since those early years that we were watching this industry expand and grow, it has ballooned. It has grown 500% in a time span of just 10 years, and now countries in the Pacific Rim, such as Japan, South Korea, etc., they want to copy these renewable energy policies that Europe and the United Kingdom first set out all those years ago, back in 2009, 2010. Because of that, they need a new sourcing region. The United States has some of the greatest forests, and yet these forests are really susceptible to being exploited for industries such as the wood pellet biomass industry. Now, again, I'll tie this back to the policy because renewable policies that incentivize forest biomass have taken the claims of sustainability around forestry and just sent those up in smoke. The reason being is that forest sustainability is no proxy for carbon accounting or the climate change emissions that come from wood pellet biomass. Wood pellet biomass burning as a smokestack is even more carbon intensive than the fossil fuels it was meant to replace. And unfortunately, for communities on the ground back in the Southeast, as well up in Canada, which is the second biggest producing region in the world, are facing some major air pollution impacts from these wood pellet production mills for segregation, as well as they're not seeing meaningful or significant changes to their own livelihoods in response to this industry cropping up. New Jersey. The Port of Stockton already has some of the highest pollution burdens in California. In fact, they're ranked the 99th percent of that. They have high rates of asthma, which are between the 96th and 99th percent. This is so egregious. The Stockton is listed as a non-attaining area for particulate matter and ozone. They've been selected as a community to receive additional supports for reducing air pollution under California AB 617. There have been fires and explosions at pellet storage silos at ports across the southeastern United States for the past 20 years, or in over 50 fires or explosions. In my home state of Texas, a fire at a wood pellet storage silo actually burned for 102 days in 2017, which sent smoke into the adjacent neighborhood, caused the hospitalization of many residents. Another thing to bring up here in relation to the wood dust, aside from the fires and explosions, is the fugitive wood dust itself. So by handling pellets, they inevitably release fine dust. This includes forms such as PM2.5 and PM10. That is important to the community of South Stockton considering their asthma risk. One community I've had the honor to work alongside includes Sunset Park in Wilmington, North Carolina. They have a wood pellet storage and export terminal. This community was guaranteed fully enclosed operations of wood pellet handling to lessen the fugitive stuff. And yet, the community has sent in complaint after complaint week after week to North Carolina DEQ for the past 7 years, complaining about the wood dust that showers down on their houses, their lawns, their barbecues, even their animals when they just play fetch in their yard. It's so egregious that North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality has actually forced the wood pellet facility and storage terminal to adopt additional fugitive death control measures. Yet the community members continue to speak out. It's very difficult to manage this industry. It's not just the wood pellet storage and export terminals, it's also the wood pellet production facilities themselves. They often act in almost with a style of impunity in relation to the Clean Air Act, both in the United States as well as up in Canada. Just to put a finer point on that, they faced 189 violations up in Canada. Over 180 of those are air quality violations. I think for the state of California, particularly in communities that have air pollution issues, such as Stockton, the Central Valley, the Tuolumne County facility area, we need to be highlighting that issue because we don't need additional pollution sprints at this time for criteria pollutants, nor the greenhouse gas emissions that we were talking about earlier. TW. Documents have not been made available either. The Golden State Natural Resources is pushing forward with this project and is holding public meetings, but has not made documents accessible to residents. Wood is not a very energy-dense material, and transporting it far distances increases the energy intensity of the fuel when it is ultimately burned. RVF. What do we know about greenhouse gas emissions from other pellet plants, and what can we expect perhaps from this proposed facility? RVF. We don't have a way to capture emissions from harvesting drying pellets. One of the places that they make the most fatal flaw, though, that is not about the upstream emissions. It's actually the emissions that come from the smokestacks themselves when wood pellets biomass is burned. Just to detail those European Union and British policies earlier, GSNR has made the same fatal flaw of assuming burning wood pellets of a smokestack will produce zero emissions. Let me just be very clear. This disregards the basic laws of physics. It's scientifically indefensible. We really need to get into the cradle to grade emissions of forest biomass. Scientists across the world, including our own EPA Scientific Advisory Board, have discounted any sort of policy notion that burning biomass could be carbon neutral. The categorical assumption that GSNR and other policymakers have made is that the emissions released through the combustion of forest biomass are somehow inherently offset by forest regrowth, that they are mitigated through that biogenic process, and thus they should not be counted. However, firing forest biomass at a smokestack increases stack emissions and introduces a carbon debt period, and it relies on uncertain future mitigation. The best estimates that we have based off of the forest type, where it's coming from, where it's eventually burned, those estimates can be anywhere from 4 decades to over a century. For anybody who's paying attention to the climate change impacts all around us, we do not have the time to wait for that. When you burn forest material at the smokestack, it's immediately released at that time and place of combustion. This is enormously concerning for a state like California, because even though we're not proposing, at least not yet, the bunnies would tell us that any of the bioenergy facilities, they will be burned somewhere in the world. That increase in carbon emissions is very detrimental and scary for a state that is seeing wildfires that are right now being climate-driven themselves. So there's very minimal confidence that GSNR is going to guarantee any sort of carbon dioxide emissions, and we should not be pointing to them as any sort of mitigation tactic. In relation to wildfires, we really need to be putting our resources, our time and energy towards home hardening and vegetation management that is going to be effective at protecting those homes and livelihoods, which is within a 60 to 100-foot buffer of homes and communities. TW. We also know that Golden State Natural Resources is partnering with some really bad players, including Drax. And Jay, do you feel confident being able to talk to us about who Drax is? One of their partners in developing this scheme? New Jersey. So Drax is, as far as I am aware, the operator of many of the Southeast pellet mills. They are also a power generation company, predominantly in England. They are basically responsible for coming up with the financial capital for this plant to even be proposed in California. So the facility alone is going to cost several $100 million. This is not something that GSNR is capable of coming up with. And so this partnership will rely heavily on this multinational corporation that does not have a good track record with abiding by environmental regulations. So it represents perhaps one of my greatest concerns about this partnership that's forming between GSNR and Drax. TW. RVF, do you have anything else to add about Drax? RVF. I'm very familiar with Drax's operations in the Southeast. Drax is one of the most notorious wood pellet producers for breaking the law in the Southeast. They've racked up millions of dollars of fines. Just to list out a couple, $2.5 million of fines in Mississippi and the $3.2 million in fines in Louisiana. Not exactly your most polluter, I guess. I would say they're pretty polluter-friendly states, right? So it's not a very good record that we're looking at in bringing those sorts of operations to the state of California. Communities that face Drax in the Southeast are frequently complaining about their operations, and this isn't alone to the Southeast. Policymakers, even in the UK, where Drax is based, have spoken out against the obscene subsidies that Drax received just this week down at the COP16 Biodiversity Summit in Colombia. A UK member of parliament spoke out vigorously against forest biomass energy, specifically calling out Drax and saying that the $9 billion that the UK has spent has really been a waste, as it's made air pollution and carbon emissions even worse while raising forests. What that raises to our attention is that Drax is under a very watchful eye, and they are under scrutiny in the UK. Drax is reliant on the subsidies that the UK government gives Drax. Right now, their subsidies to extend past the 2027 period are under review. If Drax doesn't receive those subsidies, these mills are going to go belly up. There is no way that they are going to be able to exist. It's very expensive to accumulate wood pellet material, to process it into wood pellets, and to transport it. They're relying on public funding that apparently is supposed to be helping them face the climate crisis. So I think that given these situations, and especially knowing that they're under some harsh review at this time in the UK, it should also make us very wary from opening up our doors to them. TW. The draft Environmental Impact Report, DARE, for this project has just been released. We are wading through it. The DARE itself is 1,300 pages. And then when you add in all the appendices, it's thousands of pages more. So we are steadily working our way through it in our drafting comments. RVF, anyone is concerned about this project and wants to get involved, how can they interact with you and with NRDC? RVF, Natural Resources Defense Council, we are trying to mobilize a public action. So we would like to be able to send comments to Golden State Natural Resources on this forest resilience demonstration project. So, around mid-November, we will have an action alert on our website that folks can go to and take. It's just on nrdc.org. I would say that is the best option right now. The other option is to go to Sika.net. That's the overall California holding house of this project, and to look up the project itself, go through the draft environmental impact report, come up with comments on your own, and even reach out to us as advocates to let us know your questions. If there's anything that we can support you with, or do some fact-finding on. Everything that our coalition says is scientifically backed. So, we would love to be able to support the public in elevating any concerns that they have. TW, Mount Shasta Bioregional Ecology Center. You'll do great work in what is sometimes a hostile environment. Northeast California is not terribly welcoming or friendly to environmentalists. How can folks get involved and understand what you're working on and help support you? New Jersey. We're going to be looking over this DARE document for the next month. The health risk analysis component of it, which is an appendices that is about 3,000 pages long that documents the expected increase in asthma, respiratory disease, heart disease, cancers related to living near or around these facilities or the port facilities. That should be concerning. Like RVF said, these places around these facilities are sacrifice zones. It's pretty incredible to think that California would allow this type of industry to spring up, especially given that the Port of Stockton is identified as already being heavily burdened with these specific disease risks. We are a very small grassroots organization. Our capacity is actually assisted by NRDC. We gather a lot of scientific information from them, and we are looking for anybody to help support us, always available for questions. We are working with a pretty broad group of conservation-minded organizations to work on a collective comment for this project, TW. And this has been a really fascinating and already a tremendously impactful coalition of groups that has come together. We have international players, we have Biofuel Watch, we have Big Green National Groups, Natural Resources, Defense Council Center for Biological Diversity, Sierra Club, and then we have regional groups that are terribly effective like NJs at the Mount Shasta Bioregional Ecology Center. So if you are concerned about this project, feel better that it has the full attention of the environmental movement, and we are working on it right now. 5F California IRA Rebate Program. California launches IRA Rebate Program. ACHR News. Washington. Add California to the list of states that have officially launched a federally funded Inflation Reduction Act's home energy rebates. 5G California Placer County. Burn permit suspension lifted. Placer County CA.gov burn permits can now resume burning on permissible burn days. The burning of trash-painted wood or other debris is not allowed. 5H California San Joaquin County. San Joaquin County Park schedules weekend events. Riverbank News. Wood smoke reduction program starts November 1st. 5I California Sierra. Burn suspension and wood stove usage for home heating. Sierra News Online. While the burn suspension restricts outdoor burning activities such as debris burning and campfires, it does not extend to wood stoves or fireplaces. 5J California Sonoma County. CAL FIRE to lift burn permit suspension in Sonoma County. CA.gov County of Sonoma. Burned. Burning trash-painted wood or other debris is not allowed. Do not burn on windy days. Piles should be no larger than 4 feet in. 5K California South Lake Tahoe. Charcoal use ban lifted in South Lake Tahoe burn permits now available for other areas. South Tahoe now. There is never any open flame burning with wood allowed in the city limits of South Lake Tahoe at any time of the year except in the designated. 6A Colorado. IRA funds boost energy appliance upgrades for low-income Coloradans. Realvale. U.S. Department of Energy photo of heat pump electric systems. A state rebate program, the first phase of a larger rollout of over $140. 6B Colorado. Colorado opens its home energy rebates program. ACHR News. We are focused on saving Coloradans money on energy bills by increasing access to high-efficiency heat pumps and better insulation for homes said. Federal Home Energy Rebate Program launches in Colorado. CBS News. The program will provide home electrification and appliance rebates to qualified Coloradans when they install cost-saving measures like heat pumps. 6C Colorado. Rocky Mountain National Park announces plans for prescribed burn. RMNP News. Estes Park News. Smoke may affect your health. For more information, see www.colorado.gov. Pacific Fee Wood Smoke and Health. Safety Factors Weather Conditions. 7 District of Columbia. Biden-Harris administration announces District of Columbia's launch of Federal Home. Department of Energy. The federal rebates will provide up to $8,000 for an Energy Star certified heat pump HVAC, $4,000 for an electrical panel, $2,500 for electrical heat pump clothes dryer. Initially, the district's AHEP program will be rebates which provide 2 separate rebate programs to consumers. 8 Florida. LG wins 2025 AHR Innovation Award for Residential Cold Climate Heat Pump. Webwire. The LG Residential Cold Climate Heat Pump, which will be showcased at the AHR Expo 2025 in Orlando, Florida next February, offers opportunities too. 9 Georgia. Stage 1 fire restrictions in place beginning October 31st, 2024. Douglas County. Wood burning stoves within buildings only. Professional fireworks displays that are permitted according to Section 1228, 103 of the CRS Fire. 10 Illinois. Joliet scrapyard fire shuts down nearby roads, expected to burn through night, no injuries reported. ABC 7 Chicago. Firefighters have had to dig through the burning pile of wood, plastic, and metals to get to the source of the firefighting flames the whole way. 11A Maine. Backyard Naturalist. The Great Heat Pump Adventure Part 2 Kennebec Journal. Columnist Dana Weil details a multi-year journey of figuring out how best to heat his home from Frankenstein monster setup to mixed results. 11B Maine. Efficiency Maine's heat pump and heat pump water heater initiatives receive Leader of the Piscataquis Observer. Efficiency Maine emerged the winner in the home electrification category for its programs promoting heat pumps and heat pump water heaters in 5B Maine. Getting ready heat pumps retrofits and a greener future. SeacoastOnline.com. Even with our long freezing winters, Maine is leading the country in heat pump adoption, adding 100,000 heat pumps by 2023 and raising its goal. 11C Maine. New incentives spark demand for whole home heat pumps in Maine. Maine Public. A new incentive program aimed at getting Maine homeowners to switch to high-efficiency heat pumps for all their heating and cooling has finally. Most of the time when the old rebate program, it was only a couple $100, so people would get just one heat pump, he said. Now they get to 11D Maine. Whole home heat pumps take off in Maine. Energy News Network. Energy News Network. Electrification. Maine's whole home heat pump rebate program picks up speed after it replaced a previous incentive that was not having the 12 Maryland. Maryland issues statewide ban on open-air burning amid wildfire threats. WJLA. Burning stack of wood in a fire bowl made of steel in a warm summer night. Fall. Why you can't burn that campfire or start up that charcoal grill in Maryland this weekend. WTOP. Did you gather some wood for a campfire this weekend? The Maryland open-air burning is defined by state law as a fire where anything is. 13 Massachusetts. Smoke from brush fires creates health concerns, doctor says. Massachusetts. CNHI News. Now's not a good time to burn candles and incense or light fireplaces or wood burning stoves either, she added, since that adds more unhealthy. 14A Michigan heat pump rebates. Biden-Harris administration announces Michigan's launch of federal home energy rebate. Department of Energy. For an Energy Star certified electric heat pump for space heating and cooling. $4,000 for an electrical panel. $2,500 for electrical wiring. 14B Michigan the electric vehicle race to second place behind Tesla. Ford lags because it hasn't developed battery factories within the United States compared GM. 14B Michigan electric vehicles by Ford and GM. New York Times. Ford took an early lead in electric vehicles. Now GM is surging. Ford is struggling to make money on battery-powered models, while General Motors, which started more slowly, says it is getting close to that goal. Ford's F-150 Lightning truck beat the Tesla Cybertruck to the market by more than a year. RAWSEP View. GM builds batteries for electric vehicles inside the United States, so its vehicles are eligible for a $7,500 federal tax credit for consumers of electric vehicles. GM has electric vehicle battery factories in Tennessee and Ohio. Ford uses electric vehicle batteries from Poland and China. This gives GM an edge over Ford according to this article. According to this article, Ford's quicker entrance into the electric vehicle market has hurt them in comparison to GM. There is also some discussion about how both GM and Ford are doing in comparison to Tesla in the area of electric vehicles, and the prize goes apparently for whoever can be second to Tesla. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. October 29, 2024. In the race to be second to Tesla in the U.S. electric vehicle market, Ford